Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning for those that are on the other side of the world, and welcome to the next digital series for the Global Aerospace Summit on technology transfer and building the defence sector, challenges and opportunities. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers today to share their views on this, and we'd like to obviously offer our thanks to each of those individuals from Tawazun, Lockheed Martin, Collins Aerospace, Raytheon Emirates, and of course the Defence Service Marketing Council, who have collaborated with us closely in order to pull this panel together. Very interesting discussion coming up today, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions that come along as we move through the discussion. On that note, the attendees are muted when you join the webinar, so I'm afraid you can't join in my voice, but what you can do is submit questions. Now, please do make sure you submit those questions through the Zoom Q&A function. We won't take any questions that come through from chat, but if they're submitted to Q&A, then we'll check them in the background, and Matthew, as moderator of the discussion, will pick out the most interesting ones and share those with the group. There is going to be a recording made of this, and it will be available on demand post events. So I hope that everyone has a fantastic and interesting session. I'll hand over now to Matthew, who is going to be moderating our discussion today. So Matthew, over to you. You're on mute.
Assalamu alaikum, greetings. Thank you very much, Ed, for the introduction. To all of our 300 plus organizations and attendees today, welcome to the Global Aerospace Summit 2020 and Defense Services Marketing Council webinar series. As part of our monthly working groups at DSMC, we work to bring the defense, space, and security community together to discuss important issues that impact all of our organizations with regard to economic development in the UAE. My name is Matthew Cochran from DSMC, and I am honored to be your moderator today. Special thanks to our distinguished panel of experts from Tawazun Economic Council, Collins Aerospace, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon Emirates. And again, our hosts, the organizers of Global Aerospace Summit 2020, which will be held next month on the 28th and 29th of September. We hope that this webinar series will help us gather more information that you would like to see during the Global Aerospace next month. The panel topic today is technology transfer and building the defense sector, challenges and opportunities. Before I turn to the panel to make opening remarks on the topic today, please allow me to introduce each briefly. His Excellency, Matar Ali Al-Romaithi, Chief Economic Development Officer at Tawazun Economic Council. Robert or Bob Harward, Chief Executive Officer, Middle East for Lockheed Martin. Alan Davis, Chief Executive, Raytheon Emirates. And Jay Little, Vice President, Collins Aerospace. Please find out more about our great expert panel by visiting our Global Aerospace Summit 2020 and Defense Services Marketing Council website, and feel free to contact me directly after the event for more contact information. And again, thank you to Ed from running the technology on the back end of this webinar series. We will be taking questions at the end, so I do encourage everyone that's attending to please make those questions available for us to pick up. During these unprecedented times during COVID-19 and the new normal of doing business is evolving with velocity every day, this panel will help us understand what the future of technology transfer looks like in the UAE from these key stakeholders working together to enhance the industrial base. We will explore how we can work together on new projects that contribute to the wider industry ecosystem and enable the successful development of industrial partnerships. This is really all about economic development. With that, again, I'd like to turn it over to His Excellency Matar for opening remarks. Matar?
Well, thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. And I would like really to welcome everybody on this webinar. And I think it's a great opportunity to get together over a difficult time of COVID-19. I think, technology prove us another round with there is always a need for working hard and introducing new solutions. And if you are not thinking ahead, you always be out of the game, I would say. Here in UAE, we are looking really at, technology really carefully. We've looked at three elements, which is a very important elements or a very important pillars to develop technology in the country and also make our partners more keen to share their valuable technologies and IPs where we can work together successfully and create a great allies for the future. So I'm looking at different, success factors, and I think all comes around, I think, three things, in my opinion. Number one is people. And investment in people is very essential and very important to do that, to achieve these developments. The second thing is either organizational or process perspective, and that could cover organizations, could cover, I would say, legislations that enable these developments. And the last piece of it, which is, I would say, systems or technologies that enable us to achieve those. So here, if you look at the region, we have different, I would say, countries with different, level of maturity when it comes to technology development. If I talk specifically about UAE in this case, I think UAE has, moved along and become a very competitive in the region when it comes to have, educated people, to have the right system, I would say, in place and legislations, and also finding the right way of applying technology. If I look at, I would say, artificial intelligence per se, it became an essential and center of focus for the country. And I would say, we have one minister who represents artificial intelligence in UAE. So I think it is important, and countries need to make a conscious decision when it comes to invest in technologies. And it's not just buying IP does not do it. And if you look at what being developed over the, a decade or so in the defense industry specifically, I can tell you we started with really building manufacturing capability that enable us to have a proper know-how and a place, and building on that to move forward with, I would say, evolving the defense industry and attracting the right partners in a place to achieve that. I'm really happy to be part of this panel, and I think I'll be really looking forward to exchange thoughts with my friends in the panel, and also answering questions as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Matar. Thank you very much for that. Bob, may I turn it over to you, sir? Bob, you're on mute. Sorry for that.
There you go. Matar, thank you. And it's just a real honor and pleasure to be on the attending this webinar with so many, I call them friends and family, because Jay, Alan, Matar, we've all been doing this for so many years now. And that's part of the good news story. We have this corporate knowledge and experience of this, where we've been doing it so long, we've seen this evolution. And I was struck by your comments, Matar, where you talked about the region. There is, in my world, somewhat this UAE than the rest of the region, because UAE has been so proactive so focused and evolved this process to the point we are today, that there's a level of maturity and experience there that really sets the model for the region, and the rest of the region tends to catch up on that. But going back to this IP issue, and Matar hit it exactly on the spot, that we're trying to mimic. IP has always been a challenge for, evaluating what's it worth, what's it cost. A lot of different stakeholders have a play in this thing, be it the USG, not just industry itself. So, and we all struggle and work through that. But this evolution of where we are today is really indicative of the maturity of the process. As Edge has come on board, as the DGP evolves into Tawazun, and especially good or bad, this COVID situation, our ability now to communicate with the speed of relevancy throughout my company, Lockheed Martin, where we can reach down into any component, be it the tactical level or the operational, to get those players and stakeholders on the line to work through those processes, and what needs to deliver that IP is essential, and really a step in the right direction. Going back to Matar's priorities, people, that's been our cornerstone from day one. Intern programs where we bring on and expose our engineering capabilities and our actual engineers, where we link them to the interns who then validate their capabilities, giving all the players, UAE, our companies, and others, to see how they're committed and their capabilities, to then bring them on board and do OJT training, on the job training, and then mentor through the process, so at the end of the day, they become the most important component of the IP. And I think we've matured to the point where we have now a real process, validated, tested, to deliver those people who can replace one of our engineers with Emirati engineering students. So that's, I think, the most important part of this IP. Systems and tech, that comes with time as we build these systems, and as we build this manpower and womanpower, whatever, the human capital that's going to support it will really be the long-term play here. And I think we're on a glide slope for that. Like no others. And then finally, these systems you talk about, AI. I know how much we've all been focused on drones, developing not just the IP in the system, but the overall concept of how that's going to be integrated into the defense industry, much less the defense concepts of operations. So we've seen that all over the last many years now, nickel dime piece, but now it's holistically integrated together. And that's the perfect part, or the best part of this evolution where we are. We're not looking at one component of that alone, but all of them are evaluated and integrated, from the development, the concept, and then how it's applied, but then through the procurement process and then integration into the system. So I think we've turned a real corner here. We see the new players on the team, and it's just a great team. So I'm very optimistic. Well, I think we've done a pretty good job, but this process and where we are in this evolution is just going to put us over the edge. And I think at the end of the day, where we had some of these USG issues, validation of this process with the recent assessments will only help politically our government, the US government, to support and understand this process, to allow us to bring all of those components to bear more quickly. And for all of us, that's helpful because it speeds up the process for business and adds to that experience level. So I couldn't be happier of the evolution. I think we're all connected in the ways we need to do. And it's going to be a really exciting going forward. So thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Bob. And I like that word optimism, especially during this new normal. That's a good thing to hold on to. Alan, Raytheon Emirates. Let me turn it over to you. And as one of the first landed companies, I remember Matar presenting you the glass sealed date palm seed. And so would really welcome your opening remarks on this subject, please.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, Matthew, for having us here and being a part of the panel. And then obviously it's a pleasure to be on the same panel with Mahtar. And so I'm really looking forward to today. I think it's an exciting topic. You know, I've already heard the term unprecedented times, challenges, COVID-19, all of those obstacles and difficulties. But when you think about it, and to Mahtar's point, that's when people are at their best. When your back is against the wall, that's when creativity and innovation flourishes. And so when you think about the environment that we have today and the things that have been accomplished during this pandemic, including, you know, Hope for Mars, the mission from the UAE, including some of the technologies and the innovation that's gone on here in the region to protect the community, to protect all of us from the COVID and from the pandemic, it's fascinating. And so as we move forward through these times, it's going to be an accelerant to additional innovation, additional creativity. And when you match that with people, and you match that with technology and IP, there's really not a limit to where we can go as a community, as an industry. You know, all of us here are anchored in the aerospace and defense industry, but that's really just a foundation for us to participate in the overall economy here. We'll talk a little bit about the offset program, but Mahtar and his organization have really moved offset from this transactional relationship to a value proposition here in the community, where it's not, I buy something from you, you buy something from me. We end up investing as partners with our technology and capability, match it with training and developing Emirati knowledge-based leaders, whether we bring them to the US or we bring people here, and develop new missions, new markets, new capabilities that allow us to have business outside of the UAE, but continues to benefit the UAE. And so it's an exciting time to be here. We're looking forward to participating in this as a landed company. You know, we are celebrating 30 plus years here as Raytheon. And I would tell you we're in the infancy stages of that business relationship. So we're excited to be here, and I'm very pleased to be a part of the panel today.
Alan, thank you very much. Our last panelist for opening remarks, Jay, you've been a part of our monthly working groups hosted at the Tawazun offices for years. And you know, when Bob says it feels like family, it really does feel like family. It feels like we're having, you know, I don't have my crazy brothers online, but it does feel like a family, Jay. I've gotten used to seeing you monthly at the Tawazun working groups on offsets. And so really hearing from you, how has this evolved? How has this topic evolved? And what are your opening remarks around that?
Yeah, so first, thank you, Matthew, for having me join this panel, and thanks to Mahtar and Edward for organizing it. So first thing I'd like to say is I'm really proud actually to be representing Calendar Aerospace. We're the newest company probably here. We just formed in 2018 as Rockwell was acquired by UTC. But that said, we've been in the Middle East, or parts of our brand has been in the Middle East for decades actually. And like you just said, I've been in the Middle East for the last 5 years, originally with the Rockwell Collins side, looking to set up partnerships here specifically for Rockwell Collins. And you know, this topic today is something that's really near and dear to my heart. Pretty much my whole career, I've been focused on, I never looked at it as far as technology transfer. I always looked at it as localization, because what we've always thought is the best way to serve our customers is through a local presence. And I think as we go through the panel today, you know, a lot of my comments will be around that. Where we've really succeeded globally is when we've set up that local presence, and then we're able to harness that local talent. We're able to harness the innovation, especially in a region like the Middle East and especially in the UAE, where we can create solutions for our customers that I know we wouldn't have done if we would have tried to do that from maybe our headquarters back home far away. So, you know, I'm really happy to be part of this discussion. And like I said, for me, everything revolves around trying to serve our customers better. And for me, one of the best strategies to do that is to be able to do it locally, where we can really be much more intimate and have a quicker reaction, as well as have some insights that we would never have if we weren't here locally with the customers.
And Jay, thank you for that. I believe that many of you have highlighted our first question here for the panel, but let me direct it a little bit more. Our first question for the panel today is, as regional defense and industrial capabilities are ramped up, what are the barriers and opportunities for effective technology transfer? And I want to throw the first part of that question to both Matar and Bob. You both talked about you expanded on the localization and focused on, Matar, I think you said 3 pillars: people, structure, systems, and technology. And the first part of that, the people part. Bob, you also highlighted the internship program, SEEDS, which is a wildly successful program now at Tawazun. Matar, Bob, can you open up and talk about what are some of the opportunities and also some of the barriers when it comes to people?
I think, you know, when, if you allow me, Bob, you know, people development, we have a very strong academic, you know, schools here in UAE. And I would say, I think what we were missing is the link between the industry and the academia, where we also cap it with the government directions toward, you know, a long-term plan. So I would say we were lucky enough over, you know, the years, you know, we've looked at this carefully and the government put it on top of the agenda. We translated these directions to become a policy and way of dealing with our partners. And I would, you know, capitalize on this because, you know, dealing with partners in the right way, where we have, you know, the right understanding in place will help us to achieve. So when it comes to a people perspective, we were looking at, you know, hiring UAE national is one element, but I think equipping the UAE national with the right expertise will help in moving forward. So, you know, in all our schemes of policy, we were looking at, you know, larger incentives when it comes to Emiratization. In addition, I think, you know, being a small population, we were lucky, you know, geographically, we have the opportunity to attract, you know, I would say a strong international, I would say, expertise who helped us in building this country. So I would say with this critical mix of expertise helped us to shape and, you know, enhance the way that we're dealing for the aspect of people. You know, it is given in certain countries like United States, for example, you know, the mix of culture is there. We are also lucky for a small country. We've been able to have the mixed culture or international culture, I would say. That helped us to be more, you know, understanding and being able to work together on that domain. SEEDS, you mentioned SEEDS, Matthew, and I think, you know, for those who doesn't know what SEEDS stands for, we are really building an expertise from UAE national to work on defense and I would say security field. And we're talking about, you know, so it stands for Sustain, Enhance, Emiratization in Defense and Security. So it is essential that we look at it, and, you know, it's literally putting the seed to grow that human aspect and make it, make this population, and I would say the human capital, grow as we go, because, you know, the government has a very ambitious plan, and you just mentioned, you know, Alan talking about Hope mission to Mars. I think that was a great success during a very difficult time. So that wouldn't happen without having the right people in a place and the right leadership in a place. So I think this is a good lesson to learn for all of us. And I think, I would leave the floor for Bob. I'm sure he has, a great experience to add there.
Well, thanks, Matar. I don't know if you're making that great experience because of my age. You bring out the dinosaur, he can tell you what happened, how the earth was formed. So, but I'll take it for what it is. So thank you. And again, as Matar said, let's focus on that point. It's the old good news, bad news, people. People are the most important component of this, and sometimes they can be the hardest. And the things we see here, there is a capacity issue, not in terms of the number of engineers, but taking these young, bright engineers and now forming a career path against them that they believe in and want to pursue. We've been doing the intern program with Tawazun, with Mubadala for years. And these kids are absolutely amazing. They're driven. And yet, at the end, they get to the same point, almost all of them. And this was true when we worked on the drone programs, when we worked on space fundamentals. When they got to the end of their projects of the interns, they all turned and said, now I want to go start a business on it. Well, that's great, but hey, I need you to do this for 5 or 6 years. I need you to be committed to the command and control system of the Air Force. I need you to be committed to this. So we've got to make that career path enticing, realistic, and something they believe in. Because when you talk about capacity, we're all competing now for that same gene pool, those bright young kids who want to go in there and change the world, and they can do it, but their speed and the objects may be a little different. So we're going to have to be in this game of really enticing them, show this, why this is so important to the country, but more importantly, why it's so important to them and how exciting. So we're going to be competing for these very talented people and making sure we provide the leadership that brings them into the fold. And I'm saying this has been going on for years, but now it's a really dedicated and defined process. I look at Khalid Al-Breaki, who's now at Edge, as we all know. Khalid was in the Air Force. Then he went out in industry for success. So he had a career path. We groomed him, but he never knew where he was or where he was going. It just evolved. Now we're going to highlight for these kids what that path is, where they can be, what authorities they're going to have, what responsibilities they're going to have. We're going to have to motivate them and then challenge them to produce it. And if we can do that, the IP will just be sucked into the vortex and brought to the front of every program we do. And so we're at the evolution now where we're going from cradle, from day one to grave, so to speak. We can define that career for them, encourage them, support them, and motivate them along the whole path. And so that's why this is really a defining moment in UAE as we work to build that, compete, and then build that capacity to not only own all this IP, but run and develop it to meet the needs of UAE going forward. So it's an exciting time, as both Alan and Jay and Matar referred to, and it's just going to be a lot of fun.
This timeline, and when I arrived in 2003, and I think many of us, have called UAE home for a long time. I remember meeting young Emiratis who were participating in all of your company's different events. There might be Innovation Challenge, or there may be different robotics challenges, but each of your companies sponsored young Emiratis that were in universities to go out and challenge themselves, even if they were on track to go work for an oil and gas company, or if they were on track to go work for Emirates Airlines or Etihad Airlines. you ignited a spark in many of these young people that I watch them on nights and weekends become entrepreneurs, you know, trying to set up a company while working a full-time job. And now, when you flash forward to this timeline that we're talking about, now there are one of the largest defense companies in the world, Edge. There is a home for some of these young Emiratis who have gone through your various programs and are now building and contributing to the growing ecosystem. Alan and Jay, I'd like to turn the next question over to you. And again, I'd like to welcome the panel to jump in at any time if you want to answer any of the other questions. But the next question, Alan and Jay, when we talk about the technologies that are seen as priorities for the region, and we see what does the UAE want to focus on, Matar mentioned the Mars probe. Matar threw that challenge out at DSEI last year, and there was a slide that actually said, here's an economic development program focused on a colonization of Mars. And I think a lot of people said, what is Matar talking about Mars for? But it was really to say, you know, you need to think about what are some of the priority, the technologies that not just Tawazun is thinking about, but the whole UAE as a federal body. And so with that being said, what are some of the technologies that you see as priorities? And can you talk about the technology transfer as a lesson learned in your business? So whether that's about the new US administration saying that we can have different types of drones now in the UAE. That's a big step forward. It took a lot of work by all of your companies to make that one example happen. But can you talk about what are the priorities for the technologies for the region, UAE for export, and also talk about the technology transfer lesson learned and how to bring those technologies here successfully? Alan?
So let me just kind of start, and you know, the technology and the people all go together, believe it or not. And Bob talking about interns reminds me, you know, the most exciting days I have are the days we bring our interns in and the days they leave, because they have so much energy. And I always tell them, you're actually studying for jobs that don't exist today in industries that don't exist either. And you can't ask for a better circumstance as a young professional. And so we just brought our first group in this week, and I'll tell you the same experience Bob has. They have this energy. They don't know what they can't do. And that's really what we need as we move forward, especially when we start talking about space. And so clearly when we talk about technology transfer and we talk about IP, it really starts with, you know, approval, State Department approval. It really starts with, you know, Defense Technology Security Agency. And the good news there is, we've already had an audit here in the UAE. Bob and I sponsored that audit. We worked closely with the Minister of Defense, and we have all of the proper processes, procedures, and rigor to safeguard that technology. Not only US technology, but UAE technology. And by able to demonstrate that we can safeguard it, allows us to continue to have access to that technology. As we look at where the industry is going, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, which is very short term, we're clearly going to be focused on the security piece of the region, regional security. That is paramount here. But the technology associated with that has multiple applications. We're very active in the space game at Raytheon Technologies, as is Lockheed, as is other companies here. Helping that technology and enabling the technology here in the UAE and providing either jobs or providing training or providing cooperative programs will help advance not only the technology here in the UAE, but it's going to be a global, universal market when we start talking about space. No one is going to get to Mars by themselves. It's going to be a collaborative initiative. And so the best we can continue to be cooperative and allow ourselves to the best we can to share in that technology and grow it, the faster we're going to be able to accelerate that. And so, you know, we'll continue to work very closely with, you know, certainly Department of State and the Defense Technology Security Agency, as well as the entities here, to make sure we understand the technology. Where does that technology exist today? But more importantly, how do we mature that technology to meet the demands of what we want to do from a market perspective?
Jay, can you expand on that point?
Yeah, I think, well, one of the great things about Collins Aerospace is we're actually about 75% commercial business. So we actually have a little bit of an advantage in this realm where there's a lot we can actually do and consider doing locally that doesn't have to fall under the ITAR. And I think, you know, space is one area that we can talk about. We've also talked a lot about in the past around MRO activity to support the defense side, which is still, I think, a fundamental area that we need to carry on to be able to service that equipment that is already in country locally. And then as I look to the future, one of the areas that we're really focusing on is the communications across all these different platforms that we have, and of course the security that goes with that. So one of the things that we can do is to plant those seeds now, but then do the innovation and do the technology development here locally, so that what we create is not ITAR controlled. It's not controlled by any other third party. It's actually Emirati controlled technology. And it allows, you know, them to control their own destiny around their network communications and their security. And then it also positions them, of course, to be able to export that. So when we think about some of our strategies, what we're really trying to do, I think, is leverage the fact that not everything we do is all ITAR controlled. We have some arrows in our quiver that are not controlled today that we can actually transfer that technology, and then we can begin to innovate and design from there locally and be free of those restrictions as we move forward.
Jay, thank you for that. I want to just recognize that we are getting many good questions and comments from the audience. We will get to your questions. If we don't get to your questions during this session, we will follow up, and Global Aerospace Summit organizers, DSMC, will work to get you answers to your question. I do want to highlight some of the audience participation at this point. One of our attendees, Chinar Kura, who is the head of Catalyst at Masdar, he mentions that they have a number of entities, 14 startups at Masdar, and would very much like to look at the SEEDS program and how they might be able to work with the SEEDS program to employ that. Another SEEDS related, Bob, sorry, over to you, Bob.
Just because that comment you just said, and Alan's, I want to just go back. Here's an interesting point. Yeah, they want to see it because they want some of those people too. And I'll tell you the truth. I'll be an honest broker here. When we did the internship, we cherry picked them. We took the best. We hired 3 or 4 interns. One is going to be running CISS probably next year. So this competition, we may want to be careful how broad we get, because it's more people who are going to try to be sucking up those resources because they're going to be so damn valuable. And that's what I was thinking of. Okay, Matar, I'm actually going to be competing with you for some of these people.
That's
and since
good.
they're in my program, I'm going to cherry pick those testimonies. So we want to maybe be careful how broad we open it, because it is, they're going to be valuable and everyone's going to want them on their team. So that's going to be some of the challenge. I would go one other item you made me think of. We talked about this Mars, and it goes back to Jay or Alan's question on the potential, maybe you, Matar. I remember, I think it was 2014, Dr. Al-Hababi of the Space Agency there was speaking at Khalifa University, and I was kind of new, and he's talking about the Mars program, and then I raised my hand. I said, well, when do you think Emirati will go in space? And he says, well, we're just looking at systems right now. Well, after he spoke, I kind of embarrassed, so I started talking to him. And then he said, Bob, that's a great idea. We're in the space community. And so look at where we are today, the first Emirati astronaut. So that's really indicative of this gene pool and this competition we're all going to face. You're going to have these great engineers, and we're going to want them. I need you to take the best command and control system in the world that the Air Force has, and I need you to be the history. Well, okay, but I'd rather start the next Apple or the next Google. So this competition is at play today, And as you can see, Mazda are wanting that. Yeah, we want to see about that. See, they're all going to be going after these people just like all of us are. And that's the real win-win for all of us. And that's where we are in this evolution. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I think we're going to get the best. The hell with all of you. We're taking the best first.
But Bob, recognizing that the International Space Station U.S. mission is run by a SEAL, I would not want to be part of that boot camp or hell week that you're going to put the interns through, but we'll come back to that.
Well, just 1 second. That's probably the perfect example. That kid is Chris Cassidy. In 2001, Chris Cassidy was running my best missions in Afghanistan, working with our Emirati SOF, in fact, in Afghanistan. We come back in late 2002. The kid walks in my office and says, "Hey, I'm going to get out." I go, "What do you mean? This is our heyday." "Well, it's too hard on the family." He says to me, "I'm going to do something else." I'm thinking he's getting out of the Navy. "You should stay in the Navy." "Oh, I'm staying in the Navy." "You're staying in the Navy and leaving the SEALs?" "Well, yeah, I'm going to be an astronaut." I laughed at first. I said to him, "What, you think you're a damn rocket scientist or something?" And he says, "Well, sir, I am a rocket scientist." At that point, I wanted to choke him out. But lo and behold, he's now an astronaut at the space station. That's the same issue for each Emirati engineer we're going to have. They know they can do whatever the hell they want to do, and they're going to do it. We've just got to present to them a very attractive option, so they pick our program or the UAE system or process or IP we need them working on. It's going to be very interesting.
Bob, I'm gonna come back to that on a separate session for sure now. I want to open this next question up to the panel at large. We have a comment from one of our members, Saeed Ghanem at MGE. He talks about IP transfer and people have inspired the UAE companies who are members of EDCC, which is a very important organization that highlights those qualified Emirati companies in defense, space, and security. And EDCC is part of Tawazun. Can the panel address the local environment and talk about what are some of the structures in place that effectively protect domestic intellectual property, and explain how your organization has approached that IP, either coming into the UAE or creating new IP?
If you allow me, gentlemen, I would like to cover a piece of this to answer this question, and I think it's a great question, from Saeed. It is essential that any international company would like to deal with a foreign or also another country, to make sure that the IP, especially in the domain that we're talking about, is defense is very sensitive area and highly regulated. So each country has to have the right process, the right organizations controlling these IPs. Whether these IPs are registered in the country and being used outside, or other way around, where international companies are partnering with the local companies here and contributing their IPs. And I think, as most of you know, that Minister of Defense, they've been very active and to solve these challenges. And some of you know that equivalent to DITS have been created under MOD to govern and make sure that those IPs, whether UAE or a third party, being governed in the right way and cover the exposure of those companies. So I wanted to highlight this piece because it is important from I would say a process and legislation perspective that facilitate ease of doing business with UAE.
Jay?
Yeah, I would just say, for us, we've expanded over the last 20, 30 years, at least that I'm aware of, in all parts of the world. And many of them are much more difficult to manage IP than they are here. So, that it's always a challenge, of course. And I think, one of our best practices is to be thinking about that IP strategy from the very beginning, and making sure we've got people on the team addressing that and putting the right protections in place as we go forward. But at the end of the day, to be honest, it always boils down to if everyone is aligned on where the IP is headed. Because one of the things I've actually seen happen in the past is when we form these partnerships, if you're not aligned on the IP generation with your partner, then one partner or the other starts to hold back, and you start to stifle that growth and that innovation. And then the partnership and the economic benefit eventually just dries up and goes away. So the way around that really is to make sure there's alignment around what's going to happen with that IP, and how are we going to actually use that IP to continue to grow the business. And so to make sure that that's something that we take care of up front, and not something that we fight about later on and then start to worry about is it protected or not protected, or do we have problems with it leaking. I think the real key is alignment early on, and making it an essential part of the strategy and an essential part of the localization plan. And like I said, for us, where we've seen the most successful localization activities take off is when that IP becomes part of the local fabric and they build on it themselves. It's not that it's never been the opposite, where it's all still controlled somewhere far, far away and they're able to continue to innovate. It's quite the opposite. So I think the trick is getting the IP in the region and in the country, and then building off of that. That's the real key.
Jay, the flexibility or the models that you're talking about, so that you're able to pivot, it makes a lot of sense. And Alan, I think I've heard you say that it has to be about multiple sectors and multiple uses. Maybe can you expand a little bit more on that? It's not, there is flexibility that is built into the system, and as we start to move faster with greater momentum now, we need to keep that flexibility so that all partners can stay in alignment.
Yeah, so I would say it goes hand in hand with a couple things, and IP and technology are, as you mentioned, Mahtar, are heavily regulated. And Jay is correct. You want to think about that IP plan when you're in the early phase of the program. But more importantly, you want to make sure that you design, develop, and produce for exportability. Because just bringing the technology here to the UAE doesn't solve the problem. Eventually, if we do our job right and we create new missions, new markets, we're going to want to export those systems and solutions outside the UAE to other customers. And the issue of technology transfer will come up again. And so we really want to make sure that we develop design for exportability. The other piece of that is we don't want to have too many unique systems or unique technologies that have one use purpose. You really want technology that is applicable across a platform of systems or a collection of sectors. And many of them are there. It's really identifying the correct ones to implement. And then that's really when the valuation of the IP becomes important, because if it's a single use item, there's not much value for that. But if it's a piece of technology that is applicable in food and water scarcity or security, medical, communications, you name it, cybersecurity, those are technologies that have value that will benefit more than one sector here in the UAE and generate revenue, generate markets beyond the intended use of that technology.
And what's really exciting about what you just said is, COVID-19, if anything, has hastened that, has made it faster. So when we look at robotics or we look at autonomous, what can machine do in place of humans? It's phenomenal what this unplanned experiment that the whole world is going through is forcing technology to be just that, to be dual use.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I think, beside that, if you have a strong and solid, I would say, technological, I would say, industry that will adapt to challenges like COVID-19. Today, if you look at, how quick is the response from the industries toward, testing equipment, different devices, and also now to vaccination. That tells you something. If you have a very strong, I would say, whether partnership with technical aspect, you can overcome and solve these issues. With this sophisticated, I would say, situation, showed us and gave us a great lesson of how we should look into after, I would say, COVID-19, and how this will help us to grow.
The remaining 10 minutes, I'd like to talk a little bit more about offset programs. There was a comment made by Nasser Al-Rashidi in the comments and questions section about what are the priority segments and technologies for Tawazun. And it really, I think, brings me to the final question for the panel, and that is, what is the place of offset programs, and what will the partnerships of the future look like across the region? We've touched on it, but Mahtar, let me start off with you. Can you talk about what's the most effective economic development, getting away from offsets as a word and talking more about how using the Tawazun Economic Council as an economic development driver?
Well, I think this is an excellent question. And, if you look at, any project we evaluate, it has to create economical impact. And in order to do that, we look at a variety of things. Part of it technology, part of it human aspect, part of it, growth, and, so on. So we, since I would say for the last 10 years, we've been looking at opportunities very carefully. And I would say it's hard to choose from the 40 plus kind of projects that being created. However, I would say, if you could look at opportunities like, AMROC, for example, with Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky working together, believing on this opportunity, lead to building a state-of-art, I would say, facility and capability with a huge number of UAE national working there and being trained and overlooked to perform, a high level of readiness for UAE Armed Forces and Air Force specifically. In addition to that, we're looking at so many opportunities like landed company. It's a good example, and since Alan is here as well, that was an opportunity that was introduced to Raytheon, for example, telling them, guys, why don't you expand your footprint and literally become local, part of our economy? And that idea was not clear for most of the people around us, and saying, okay, UAE has to have, as part of it, UAE national ownership or a local company ownership. For us, we are derived by economical impact, and we looked at having, this opportunity, creating jobs for UAE national, creating, I would say, revenue, having an opportunity for export, having most important thing as well is being ability to develop products and IPs and technologies that could end up, serving UAE and the region as well. So we looked at all of these elements in order to do. And of course, for most people who've been aware of traditional offset, our way of doing offset was JV based only. Today, we have a variety of choices. You could be, enabling a supplier in UAE. And, the good news, I would say 12 years ago or 13 years ago, we had few small companies. Today we have big companies. You know, if you have a partner of choice today in UAE, and you could go, with companies like, Edge and Edge companies, or you could go with private sector, and you have also variety of, leading companies in the private sector who could serve, the commercial and the growth opportunities. We try to enable and unlock opportunities for the industry. And when we talk about that, space is something of interest. I would say we've just launched with Airbus, AIT Center for Satellite, design and manufacturing. So this is something that help us to literally engage the local community with the international community to literally grow the pie and make it bigger for everybody to have a bigger share of that.
The rest of the panel, what I'd like to do now, and we've received a number of comments and questions. Again, thank you to everyone attending, and we will get these over to the panelists and get you answers. If with the time remaining, if I can offer you a minute or two with a closing remark about not only this subject, but we received a comment from Talal Casey, who's special advisor over at the UAE Space Agency, that says, "Hey, Bob, let's do a mission to Alpha Centauri together, the next galaxy over, and ask His Excellency Matar to make it happen." I love Talal, and I want a ticket on that ride too. Alan, starting with you, if in your closing remark, not only round us out here, but also what is the future hold for you and your organization when there are these moonshot, and in this case, an Alpha Centauri shot ideas now? The sky's the limit.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it is a exciting thing to let your mind wander. The term moonshot, and certainly the culture that we came from at Raytheon was a moonshot. When we first landed on the moon, the communication and the transistors and the technology for that communication was from Raytheon. So we're not afraid of space. We're not afraid of a moonshot. And so one of the things that we want to do, and it kind of marries up with, Matar's comments, is that, offset is important, right? But it's really the launch pad for the moonshot that says we all have technologies, we all have ambitions for new missions, new markets. And what we want to do is create those business opportunities around the guidelines that we have with Tawazun, around the business plans that we each have, that generate all of the aspirational type goals we have as an industry. And then the byproduct of the successful business of transferring technology, of developing a supply chain, of hiring Emiratis, of transferring technologies, is far beyond what the offset program would give you. So a successful business far exceeds the offset value. And so that's really what we're doing here as we start to look at the future. Is we have some core capabilities, we have some core technologies, we're absolutely going to support the systems we have here. But far beyond that, we are looking at that moonshot. We want to be a part of where the UAE Vision 2030 is, Vision 2050 is, and we want to go to that next Alpha Omega universe. And the legacy that we leave here is going to be in the hands of these young interns that are coming in today. And there's no better exciting place to be than the UAE during this time.
Thank you, Alan. Jay, I'd like to ask you to go next.
Yeah, I'd say, the vision and the way Matar had put it is so well aligned with what I think we've seen successful all around the world is creating that economic impact. And that's, we talked at the very beginning about this as what are the barriers to doing this kind of thing? And there's so many barriers, right, to technology transfer, whether it's the IP or the staffing or the partners and all that stuff. The last thing you want to do is have the framework of the project itself be another barrier, right? So it's so great, I think, here, the opportunity that all of our companies have in this country to try and look at what's something that we can do to create value locally that's going to have a sustainable economic impact? And I think the point that Alan made, all of those offset benefits will just flow out of that naturally. And pretty soon what happens is, and this is what we strive to do, is pretty soon this becomes your center of excellence for whatever piece of technology that you have. And you're not just serving, that's back to the multiple use idea. You're not just serving the customers here, you're serving the world from here for that particular product or that particular technology. And I think that's the framework that's kind of been set up here by Matar. And I think, as time goes on, we'll see a lot of success because all the great companies of the world are looking to take advantage of that ecosystem that's being, put in place here. And that's going to foster that kind of growth and development.
Jay, thank you very much. Bob, may I turn the mic over to you now?
Yeah, 3 comments. And first on this offsets. Offsets has always been a very complicated, difficult process because of the stakeholders. And where we are today, I think, is the perfect evolution. But at the end of the day, and this is one of my challenges with Lockheed Martin, when you're 6,000 miles away and you're on a different time scale, as opposed to the Ford presidents, their perspective is different. And many saw it as somewhat of an ugly baby, but they could not dispute the fact that it's resulted in, as Matar knows, the most successful joint venture Lockheed Martin has ever done. It grew up to be a very beautiful girl, very handsome young man after years, but their perception is that was still an ugly baby and tough to get to. I think these processes, and now especially this migration of DGP into Tawazun, is streamlining that and just make it even more productive for all of us. So that's just a home run in every case. Number 2, I want to throw out one 600-pound elephant or gorilla in the room we haven't talked about, but I'm concerned about it. I haven't seen signs of it yet, maybe a little bit, is these partnerships, these programs we have present some very unique issues and challenges for the USG and for our companies. Because UAE, as we all know, is friend of all, enemy to none, and has the world wanting to do business with them. But we're in this position now, if you're going down a road with a Chinese company or a Russian company or something, that has overlap or effect on that Venn diagram of how we integrate and use these systems. And in the cyber world we're dealing in, this is even going to get tougher. So while sure, UAE has all the choices in the world, some of the ramifications of going down a path with a system that's not aligned, integrated, or has security concerns is something we're all going to have to be sensitive to. And then finally, I would just say, because Alan talked to Alpha Omega, I thought it was Alpha Centauri, wherever the place. And I can say, because you can see the sun's just coming up, so my wife is still in bed, but I've been trying to get her on that Mars mission for many years now. And so if we got to shift gears to Alpha Centauri, we'll do that, but she won't be up for a while. So I'll put that benchmark here. It's still dark here and the sun's just coming up in San Diego.
Alpha Omega is beyond Alpha Centauri, and Bob.
Oh, okay, you're a better navigator than I, man. I tried to get from down the street myself somewhere else.
Bob, you're giving me more topics for future working groups, that's for sure. And these are all going to be competitions and boot camps, it looks like. Matar, you have the last word, and just one of the lessons I've learned in working with you and your team over the years has been one thing that you said to me very early on. And you said, Matthew, and we were talking about, I was setting up a small robotics company. You said, Matthew, it doesn't have to be an offset program. If it's going to be a good business, then go ahead and start it, and it might turn into an offset program. And you say it stuck with me for many, many years. And I know when I talk to people about offsets, or I talk to any of our partners, whether they're industry, government, or academia, it always comes back to that statement you made doesn't make good business sense. And so with that, I'd like to give you the last word today, sir.
Well, thank you. I couldn't agree more on most of the panelists' ideas. And I think, you know, guys, the success, I think, is I would articulate it in a way in dealing with whether it's offset or not. You know, to have the right people on the table, you could make the right decisions. And I think some of the lessons learned that I've learned on this journey, I think having, the right people is not always an easy thing to do. I remember, with Lockheed Martin, with Raytheon, with different companies, I came to them and said, guys, if you send me the contract, people, we will not do business with you. We need to do business with the people who are business development guys or corporate guys who will work with us closely to unveil the opportunity together and do it based on a clear, cautious, I would say, decision. If you're doing a project to fulfill your obligation, and I can tell you this will be a challenging journey. If you're doing a project because it's a good business, you will always be successful. Of course, each journey has its own challenges. However, I think with a clear mind on the opportunity and eyes on the opportunity, I think we will be all successful. So with that, I would like really to thank you for allowing us to tell you a little bit about what we are doing. And I think to give us the opportunity to hear from our colleagues and friends here their opinion. And also we're happy to answer questions if possible. I don't know about the time. I'm really happy and optimistic about this, this partnership. And I think going forward with the changes that we have recently happened to us, I think will streamline and will make us more, agile and programmatic when we work with identifying opportunities from the beginning that will enhance the success rate when we go live. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukhtar. Bob, Lockheed Martin, Alan, Raytheon Emirates, Jay Little, Collins Aerospace, and Your Excellency Mukhtar, Tawazun Economic Council. I thank you on behalf of the Global Aerospace Summit. The interaction today really did feel like a family reunion, and I'm looking forward to the next one. We will be building this momentum as we are all together, either virtually or in a hybrid way together here in Abu Dhabi at the Global Aerospace Summit on the 28th and 29th. I encourage all of you to contact us with your ideas, your further questions and comments, and we'll put you in touch directly. Thank you to our 300 plus attendees today and the amazing interaction and questions from the groups. Really appreciate that. Again, to our panelists, colleagues, friends, and family, I look forward to the next time we do this again. Thank you very much. Shukran. Masalama.
Thank you.
Well, thank you to Matthew and all the panelists on behalf of the Global Aerospace Summit. I just wanted to give you the opportunity to see here the virtual track registration links. We'll send these out in an email for you later on, but if you want to go to these websites, then you can get your place secured for the virtual track of the Global Aerospace Summit 28th to 29th of September. So with that, thanks once again for all your questions. We'll make sure that we take those into account when we're finalising the agenda for the summit as well. And hopefully, if we didn't get to them today, we'll make sure that we get to them in the summit at the end of September. So thank you very much all for your time, and goodbye for now.
Thank you, gentlemen. Take care.